Welcome to the debate. Um, you know, if you were handed a blueprint for a business that generated over $100 million in sales, you'd probably expect a massive document, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like flowcharts, years of research and development, layers of infrastructure.
Exactly. A really complex, multifaceted product line, because we naturally assume that, well, immense scale requires immense complexity. But what if the blueprint was exactly 3 rules long?
Just 3 rules?
Yeah. Today, we are examining Jason Fladlien's 111 formula for information product creation. And the rules are simply one problem, one solution, one sitting. This brutally simple methodology claims to be the foundational engine behind a 9-figure enterprise.
It's quite the claim.
It really is. So the central tension we are exploring today is whether such a reductionist framework can genuinely serve as the bedrock of massive business scale, or if it inherently sacrifices quality and comprehensive value just in the name of speed. I will be taking the position that, frankly, complex business success simply cannot stem from a 3-rule heuristic without producing superficial, unpolished work.
And I'll be taking the other side. I will be arguing that the 111 formula is not about cutting corners at all. In fact, its specific constraints are the exact mechanism that guarantees both product completion and, perfect market fit.
Well, let me lay out my skepticism clearly from the start, because I look at this formula, identifying one problem, offering one solution, and demanding that the product be created from start to finish in exactly one sitting, and I see a recipe for a first draft, not a finished product.
Right, a rough draft.
Yeah. I think anyone listening to this who has spent, say, 6 months or a year perfecting a comprehensive digital course or detailed book is going to feel a bit insulted by this one-sitting rule. It frames deep work as a liability.
I can see how traditionalists might feel that way, yeah.
It completely bypasses the rigorous standards of product development. The editing, the iteration, peer review, the expansions that add actual depth. So to posit that $100 million in sales can stem from a methodology that explicitly forbids stepping away from the keyboard to reflect on the work, it just defies everything we know about how deep value is created in the market.
See, I come at it from a completely different way. The traditional rigorous standards you were talking about, those are precisely what destroy most digital product businesses before they even begin.
Oh, come on. Destroy them?
Yes, literally destroy them. Because what you call reflection and iteration, well, that usually manifests as scope creep and perfectionism. The 111 formula is ruthlessly designed to eliminate the primary failure mode of all product creators, which is incompletion.
Sure, it forces you to finish.
Exactly. By forcing the constraint of simplicity and a single sitting, the formula doesn't sacrifice value. It forces the creator to distill their knowledge into concentrated value. It prevents them from hiding behind volume, right? It forces them to deliver an actual outcome, which is precisely what the market dictates.
Okay, look, I see why you think forcing a singly sitting ensures completion. Obviously, if you don't let yourself get up from the chair until it's done, you're going to finish. I'll grant you that it solves the procrastination problem.
It's a huge problem to solve.
It is, but we have to move from the theory of completion to the practical reality of what is actually being produced. Because one of the primary claims of this formula is that it produces better products. And I am genuinely struggling to understand that logic. Doesn't rushing from a blank screen to a finished product guarantee an inferior, error-ridden result?
Well, no, because you are measuring quality by academic standards, whereas the market, they measure quality by utility.
Utility over quality?
They aren't mutually exclusive, but let's look at the actual origin story of this formula from the material. So it's November 12, 2007. Jason Fladlien sits down with a blank screen, and in one single sitting, he writes a 7-page ebook titled, How to Write an Article in 7 Minutes or Less. Was it perfect? No. In fact, it literally had a typo in the very first sentence.
Okay, a typo in the opening sentence. Let me just stop you there. Because in any traditional publishing model or any professional business model, that is an immediate disqualifier.
To a publisher, maybe.
To a buyer, it signals a complete lack of professionalism.
Well, the traditional metric says it's a disqualifier, yes, but the market didn't care at all. That 7-page document was priced at $4. And fueled by a mere $20 ad spend, it sold 268 copies in less than 24 hours.
Wait, really? Just 20 bucks on ads?
Yep, 20 bucks. Because the typo didn't stop the sales, buyers are not purchasing a demonstration of grammatical perfection. They are purchasing outcomes.
I hear you, but selling 268 copies at $4, that's a rounding error. That doesn't prove the market doesn't care about quality. It just proves 268 people had $4 to gamble on a catchy title.
It's not a gamble if it solves the problem.
But if they open that book and it's a mess, they will never buy your high-ticket back-end product. You haven't built a customer base. You've just burned a lead for $4.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that the product wasn't a mess in the eyes of the buyer? The buyer wanted to know how to write an article in 7 minutes. The 7-page guide delivered that exact mechanism immediately.
So brevity is the selling point?
Exactly. And this brings us to the first key principle of the formula: instant gratification. Buyers want a specific result, and they want it right now. And education is often an obstacle to the result.
Okay, you'll have to explain that, because framing education as an obstacle seems entirely counterintuitive to, well, the whole concept of an information product.
Think about it this way. Compare a 384-page comprehensive book on parenting to, say, a 10-page guide on how to get your toddler to sleep through the night.
Right, the sleep training niche, massive market.
Massive. Now, the 384-page book takes 8 hours to read. It takes weeks to absorb the psychology, the theory, and then finally implement the strategies. Now, take the single most important page of that bestseller, the absolute core mechanism for bedtime routines, and build a 10-page product around just that.
So you just carve out the one actionable piece.
Yes. It takes 20 minutes to read, and the sleep-deprived parent can implement it tonight. Smaller results sooner beat bigger results later almost every single time. The constraint of the 1-1-1 formula forces you to identify that single most valuable, actionable thing and just discard all the rest.
Okay, I can acknowledge that a subset of consumers prefers a brief checklist over a comprehensive manual. I mean, we've all been there. But let's look at the psychology behind why they would rationally choose this over the long term.
It's totally rational.
Is it? Another claim for why the formula works is that it creates products people actually buy. But why would a consumer rationally choose a tiny, hyper-focused product over a comprehensive guide that covers everything they might need to know?
Because of how we value time and pain.
But if I am spending money, rational economic behavior suggests I should want the highest volume of information per dollar spent, right? I want the encyclopedia, not the pamphlet.
But you're assuming buyers act like rational computers maximizing a dollar. And we know from behavioral economics that they simply don't. People are not information maximizers, they are pain minimizers. And this introduces two foundational concepts of the formula: pain before gain and better than free.
Walk me through those mechanisms. How exactly does pain subvert the desire for volume?
Let's start with pain before gain. Think of a toothache.
Okay.
If you have an agonizing toothache, you will pay almost any amount of money immediately to make the pain stop today. You don't ask your dentist for a comprehensive textbook on dental hygiene, right?
Right. You just want the drill or the painkiller.
Exactly. And you certainly don't care if there's a typo on the prescription pad. Contrast that with someone who wants a wider smile. That's a future gain. They will think about it. They'll browse different whitening strips, read reviews, and procrastinate for months.
Ah, I see. When you create a product in one sitting, you are targeting the toothache. You are relieving an existing acute pain rather than offering a broad future improvement. You bypass price shopping because the urgency of the pain demands an immediate solution.
I see the logic there. The urgency acts as a catalyst. It's emergency medicine versus preventative care. And, when you're in the emergency room, you don't really ask for a discount.
You really don't.
But what about the better than free concept? Because there's so much free content out there today. How can a product you pay for be better than something you get for free? It comes down to a simple calculation of the value of time. Suppose a buyer has a specific software problem. They could spend 10 hours scouring forums, watching disparate YouTube videos, and piecing together a solution for free.
Which sounds miserable.
Right. And if we value their time at, say, $15 an hour, that free research just cost them $150 in lost time, plus immense frustration. If your product costs $9 and gives them the exact step-by-step solution in 20 minutes, buying your product isn't just a purchase, it is a profound cost-saving measure.
It saves them the $150.
Exactly. It literally costs them more money and wasted time not to buy it. Paying the $9 becomes the only rational choice.
Huh. That is a fascinating mathematical framing. If the product effectively functions as a time arbitrage mechanism, then the brevity isn't a bug, it is the core feature the buyer is paying for.
Precisely.
The fact that you wrote it in one sitting is actually aligned with the fact that they want to consume it in one sitting. However, and this is a big however, this brings us to a massive structural hurdle in your argument.
Okay, let's hear it.
We have established that you can sell a $4 ebook or a $9 10-page guide by solving a hyper-specific acute pain, but a $9 Band-Aid does not make an empire. I am looking at the claim of a $100 million business. You simply cannot scale to 9 figures selling pocket change. I have to challenge the scalability of this model.
That is a very fair challenge, but you are viewing the single-sitting product as the end of the business rather than the beginning. The 1-1-1 formula is an industrial-scale system for creating assets. Because the creation time is condensed to a single sitting, the velocity of asset creation is unprecedented.
Give me an empirical example of this velocity actually translating into meaningful revenue, because I'm just not buying it yet.
Sure, let's look at one of Jason's early students, Maddie. Maddie spent a total of 8 hours, and that is for both the product creation in one sitting and all the marketing materials.
8 hours total.
8 hours. Within 24 hours of launching, he made $4,500, and the most vital metric there was his conversion rate, which was 20%. 1 in 5 people who saw the offer bought it.
I have to pause there, because a 20% conversion rate on cold or even semi-warm traffic is astronomically high.
It's unheard of in traditional markets.
Right. Industry standard is often 1 or 2%. So that speaks to the pain before gain alignment we discussed. But still, $4,500 in a weekend is a great side hustle. It is a long way from an enterprise.
Then look at Jay Boyer. He enrolled in the program, made over $10,000 by his second week, and subsequently scaled that to $45,000 in a single month. And these are from products he could conceptualize, draft, and finalize in a single day.
Stop. Explain the mechanics there. Because you are throwing out numbers like $45,000 a month, but I need to understand how the architecture supports that. The material talks about this avalanche effect.
Yes, the avalanche effect.
For audience. How does this build an avalanche? It sounds to me like 100 disconnected, exhausting, tiny businesses.
Well, you wouldn't build disconnected niches. You build adjacent solutions within a broader ecosystem. The scale comes from compounding repeatability. You aren't just selling one product to one massive audience. You're deploying an avalanche of distinct buyer streams. Each hyper-focused 1-1-1 product acts as a specialized net, catching a specific type of buyer with a specific toothache.
Oh. So the front-end product isn't the profit center.
Exactly. The front-end product liquidates your advertising cost and acquires a buyer for free or even at a slight profit. Once they are in your ecosystem, experiencing that better-than-free value, where you actually solve their problem in 20 minutes, trust is established.
And then you upsell them.
Right. They then become back-end buyers for your other, more comprehensive products, software, or coaching. Jason repeated this specific one-sitting process over 100 times. That is how you build a massive, responsive email list of proven buyers, which is the actual engine of a $100 million business.
So the $4 ebook isn't the business. The $4 ebook is the customer acquisition strategy.
You got it.
That makes much more sense. But I want to zero in on this idea of specialized nets, because this leads us to what I consider the most problematic constraint of this entire methodology. In order to achieve that 20% conversion rate you mentioned with Madi, the targeting has to be incredibly precise. The product has to be what Jason calls hyper-specific.
Yes,
That is the fourth key to making this work. Hyper-specific.
And this is where I struggle the most. I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning at all. Because if you narrow your audience down to a fraction of a percent, you run out of potential buyers. This goes against fundamental business scaling principles. You need a big ocean to catch a lot of fish. If your product is so hyper-specific that it only appeals to a microscopic subset of the population, intentionally shrinking your total addressable market seems like mathematical suicide.
It is the exact opposite of suicide. It is survival. You are falling into the trap of wanting to compete in the ocean. Jason has a specific rule for this. Jump up and down in puddles, not in oceans. There are infinite puddles and only 4 oceans.
But a puddle dries up. If I create a product for an incredibly narrow niche, I might dominate it for a week, but the revenue ceiling is inherently capped. Why would I want to limit my potential customer base?
Let's look at the evidence, because the material provides 3 brilliant examples of the puddle strategy in action. First, consider a vegetarian cookbook. That's a massive market, an ocean, right?
Very large, yes.
If you write a general vegetarian cookbook, you are competing with celebrity chefs, massive publishing houses, and a million free blogs. Your voice is completely drowned out. Now narrow it. Imagine a Hare Krishna vegetarian cookbook that specifically excludes onions and garlic to comply with their strict dietary laws.
I mean, that is an infinitesimally small market.
It's a tiny market, yes, but within that market, it is the absolute only product of its kind. There is zero competition. When a Hare Krishna practitioner sees that book, the buying decision is instantaneous because it is perfectly tailored to their highly specific pain point. Or take Sherman, the storyboard artist.
What was his specific product?
He didn't make a product on how to draw or even how to be an artist. That's an ocean. He created a product specifically teaching people how to make money as a cartoon storyboard artist.
Wow, that's niche.
Extremely niche. It is an underserved, hyper-specific audience. But when an aspiring storyboard artist sees that, they immediately recognize it was made exclusively for them. It resulted in strong sales in a niche where no one else was even trying to compete.
The logic of avoiding competition is sound. I'll give you that. You're essentially adopting a monopoly strategy within a microeconomy.
Exactly. And my absolute favorite example from the material illustrates this perfectly. The live roach seller. Jason found an article about someone selling live roaches on eBay as reptile food. This was a genuine operating business generating $90,000 a year.
Selling insects on the internet?
Yes. And Jason's immediate observation was that this person was leaving massive money on the table. They were operating a great business, but they could make far more money by creating a hyper-specific information product, teaching other people how to replicate that exact bizarre business model on eBay, rather than just selling the roaches themselves.
That's actually brilliant.
Right? Think about the parameters. One specific problem, how to start a profitable, low-competition eBay business. One specific audience, people looking for unconventional, proven online income streams. A product like that practically sells itself because the specificity creates unparalleled novelty and authority.
I have to admit, I'm wrestling with this. Because, all of my traditional training suggests that you want to maximize your total addressable market. But when you look at the mechanics of digital customer acquisition, acquiring a customer in a broad market, the ocean, is incredibly expensive because you are bidding against everyone else for attention. Your customer acquisition cost is sky high.
Precisely. Your ad costs in the ocean will drown you before you make a single sale.
So by jumping in a puddle, your customer acquisition cost drops to near zero because the targeting is so precise and the competition is just non-existent. Capturing 100% of an uncontested puddle is indeed more profitable and, paradoxically, more scalable than fighting a brutal, expensive war to capture 0.1% of an ocean. You just have to be willing to dominate dozens of different puddles over time to build the avalanche we talked about earlier.
That is exactly the mechanism. Each puddle is a new stream of buyers feeding into your back-end ecosystem.
So, to summarize where we find ourselves, I started this discourse highly skeptical of the 1-1-1 formula. To a traditionalist, one problem, one solution, one sitting Sounds dangerously like a recipe for cutting corners. I am still not fully convinced I would personally want to hit publish on a document with a typo in the very first sentence.
Hey, baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps. However, looking at the mechanisms we've unpacked today, I concede the math on puddle jumping is undeniable. The constraints of the formula actually align perfectly with real-world consumer psychology. Buyers aren't looking for encyclopedias. They are looking for the instant gratification of a problem solved quickly. They are willing to pay for pain before gain, and a hyper-specific solution that saves them 10 hours of frustrating research is demonstrably better than free.
And that is why the simplicity of the 1-1-1 formula is actually the ultimate sophistication here. The one-sitting rule isn't about being lazy, it's a rigorous discipline. It prevents the scope creep that kills most projects. It forces the creator to strip away their own ego, the desire to sound comprehensive or academic, and deliver only the exact mechanism the buyer actually needs. The length of the product is determined strictly by the problem, whether that takes 7 pages or 50.
I am genuinely intrigued by the mechanics of this system now, especially the back-end architecture. But I can easily see how someone could fail at step 1.
How so?
Well, how does one actually begin to apply these exact parameters without accidentally choosing too broad a problem or overcomplicating the solution? If I sit down at a blank screen today, how do I know I'm targeting a viable puddle and not accidentally stepping into an ocean?
That is where the methodology gets incredibly tactical, and honestly, it requires a bit more visual instruction. For anyone looking to understand exactly how to select those hyper-specific problems and validate those puddles, I would direct them to Jason Fladlien's free training.
Is that available online?
It is. It's a 90-minute deep dive that covers the 1-1-1 formula in full, including the specific search techniques for finding product ideas and the exact conversion templates. Additionally, there is a free 20-minute PDF report called the Info Product Avalanche Effect, which breaks down the entire foundation of this $100 million system we've been discussing.
Constraints foster the greatest innovation. By forcing ourselves into a single sitting to solve a single problem, we might actually unlock the scale we previously thought required years of complex architecture. We will end the discourse here today without declaring a definitive victor, leaving you to look at your own projects and decide, are you going to keep fighting the leviathans in the ocean, or is it time to go find a puddle?